FEMA and the media have been battling what they call misinformation and a rash of conspiracy theories ever since their lackluster response to Helene. There are countless articles dedicated to dispelling these rumors, and FEMA even has a section on their own website dedicated to trying to combat this so-called misinformation that they've done a bad job. Ironically, all while spreading the lie that right-wing militias have been hunting and threatening their workers. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel, where we are still talking about Helene because it is still ridiculous. There was sort of a sweet irony when I was researching this story this morning, sitting out on the back porch, surrounded by downed trees and a circling group of vultures. It all seemed very appropriate. Now, I've gotten a few comments and messages over the last 3 weeks now suggesting that the pain and suffering of the people in Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Tennessee is somehow invalid or minimized because so-called crazy rednecks have been hunting FEMA workers with their militias. Interestingly enough, I know a couple of folks with militia connections, and so I asked both of them if they'd heard anything substantial or had any information beyond the rumors. Neither of them did. And now we know why. There were plenty of news reports coming out that FEMA workers were being threatened by groups of militias, that the National Guard itself were reporting the threats and working overtime to keep the government workers safe. Yet for all of these threats and assaults the media has been reporting, it all culminated in only one arrest. An arrest that carried a misdemeanor charge and minimal bond, and in a shocking twist, involves a social media post. Interesting. But before I get to all the rest of the details on this sordid story, this video is brought to you with the help of Blackout Coffee Company. They are a family-owned coffee roaster out of sunny Florida, built on traditional values and a love of the Second Amendment. They have amazing coffee, tea, and hot chocolate, and have even partnered with organizations like FPC and GOA so that your purchases of their partner roasts donate to those groups directly. So, to check them out, help support your rights and the channel, go to blackoutcoffee.com/libertydoll. The Hill reports FEMA workers threatened by armed groups in Tennessee. WJHL says FEMA workers threatened in Carter County. Though the actual news Chevron says the group only confronted and criticized workers. Newsweek says armed militia hunting FEMA causes hurricane responders to evacuate. Headline after headline after headline, one of them ironically reporting, "This is what MAGA does. Eventually, their lies have real-world consequences." So far, CBS is the only outlet I can see that has issued not a correction, but an update, saying that these allegations have not been substantiated by anybody. So let's look at these reports. The biggest one about the roving bands of militias hunting FEMA seemed to stem from a U.S. Forestry email. But U.S. Forestry says that they got the reports from FEMA itself, who claimed that they were told by the National Guard that militias were in the area hunting FEMA. According to the Rutherford County Sheriff, it was FEMA that made reports of multiple truckloads of militia that were threatening their workers. The message that there were truckloads of militia hunting FEMA workers was, quote, verified by 2 federal officials. No one is posting the content of this email, which will be an important detail later, but WBTV reports WBTV obtained messages sent to employees of a contracting agency that works with FEMA for inspections, which appear to show an impact area across western North Carolina. Effective immediately, disaster-wide. Cease inspections today and return to your hotels. An alert from Vanguard Inspection Services read on Saturday, FEMA received news that the Title 10 active military unit deployed to North Carolina came across some trucks of militia units who said they were out hunting FEMA personnel. All of these articles claim that FEMA paused door-to-door operations and even pulled out of some areas which, interestingly, FEMA workers themselves told Glenn Beck that they were not going door-to-door, or areas where residents say FEMA either never showed up or didn't show up for 2 to 2.5 weeks after the storm, which is around the time these articles started coming out. But even taking that out of the equation, there's something fishy here. You see, according to CBS, the North Carolina National Guard told CBS News in a statement on Monday that it had no reports of our soldiers or airmen encountering any armed militia, any threats, and any type of combatants. But remember, the U.S. Forestry Service claimed that FEMA told them that the National Guard told them that there were truckloads of militiamen driving around threatening and hunting FEMA. It turns out that the actual report was of a, quote, white male with a rifle that had made a comment about possibly harming FEMA workers in the Lake Lure area. And that while initial reports from the Forestry Service claimed that FEMA claimed that the National Guard claimed it was a militia, it was just William Parsons acting alone, and that the threat turned out to be more limited than that initial report. And the sheriff has not found any evidence to back any of these militia claims, which now they are calling, quote, potential threats. Now, NBC still claims that the initial report against Parsons was made by a National Guard soldier in the area, despite the National Guard denying that they have witnessed any threats or made any reports. So this guy, William Parsons, was arrested and charged with misdemeanor going armed to the terror of the public, which just basically requires you to have a gun and be on a public roadway and someone be intimidated by it. When he was arrested, he did have a handgun and a rifle in his possession, but he was so threatening that it was only a misdemeanor charge. He was only given a $10,000 bond and was released the same day. Now, according to many workers on the ground, everyone in those areas are walking around armed and open carrying to try and ward off looters. Not to excuse any threats that might actually have been made, but things still aren't adding up. And now, suddenly, officials are saying that they can't actually confirm any of the contents of the original email claiming that the National Guard told FEMA, who told the Forestry Service that militias were hunting FEMA. In fact, now they're saying that FEMA reported it to a forestry liaison, and the National Guard said that no one had made a single report of any threats against FEMA workers at all. Sheriffs have also come forward, such as in Ashe County, to say no threats had been reported in their counties or surrounding counties. So now everyone is pointing the finger back at FEMA, and FEMA's own rumor response page has a section for this rumor of threats made against FEMA and that they had pulled out or paused operations over these threats. FEMA's own website says this is false. The site says that they were made aware of a potential threat and that they will soon resume door-to-door operations, though Newsweek and CBS and all the others state that FEMA went back to their usual business the same day. But still, they're letting the media claim, and seeming to spread the claims, that they're out there risking life and limb and encountering standoffs with rogue bands of angry, armed men hunting them down. They even told ABC 11 that the threats against them have been consistent, despite the rumor response on their own website. Officials also told ABC that combating misinformation online has taken valuable resources away from actually helping people while they spread this misinformation. But again, all reports about these unsubstantiated threats all circle back to claims made by FEMA. Interesting. The National Guard says that it isn't happening. The Forestry Service said that, well, they didn't see it, but FEMA said it was happening. The local sheriffs have said that it isn't happening. The only people saying that it's happening is FEMA. Everyone else that they have tried to bring into this game of telephone are denying seeing anything at all. So, at the end of the day, what was this threat exactly? According to Newsweek, News Nation, WBTV, and Fox 8, it was a Facebook post saying he was looking for volunteers to come with him and take back the Lake Lure FEMA site to make sure the donations got to the people in need. A post that seems like it was likely just copy pasta. But when he got up to Lake Lure alone, he found that FEMA wasn't even there. There was no FEMA donation site. There were no FEMA workers. So instead, he stayed and helped the other volunteers in their relief efforts. But remember, the original claim was that he threatened FEMA workers with his rifle, and then it changed to making a comment about possibly hurting FEMA workers, but there were no FEMA workers in the area. But of course, he had previously shared memes and posed with a 3% logo, so evil. Law enforcement then showed up, found Parsons, and arrested him. He claims to have never made any threats. He said he was openly carrying a legally owned firearm, just like all the other volunteers in the area, and had another legally owned pistol and rifle in his truck. The end. Exercising his Second Amendment. According to Parsons, he volunteered at the Ingalls, which was being used as a civilian neighborhood relief donation point, with police and the National Guard in the Lake Lure area all day from noon to 5:30 p.m., left to deliver supplies, and returned at 7 p.m. when he was arrested. Police reports claim that they were made aware of the threat around 1 p.m., but they didn't arrest him for the additional 4.5 hours, by his story, and didn't charge him until another 3 hours after his arrest, which does raise some questions. FEMA officials are refusing to comment any further on the Parsons case and have refused to say where the supposed militia threats came from, which is a pretty big allegation that no one can seem to trace. FEMA swears up and down that it happened, but also there have been no threats, and they say they got it from the National Guard, but the National Guard said that they haven't seen anything and didn't make any reports, and the Forestry Service is the one responsible for telling FEMA workers to get out, because they were told by FEMA, told by the National Guard, that there were militia lynch mobs. But what's even weirder then is that Forestry had to tell FEMA, and somehow FEMA didn't know about the militia lynch mobs that were hunting them, even though FEMA were the ones that told Forestry. and this is what has been making the headlines, and again, turning people against the victims of Helene. And that's not even the only report that turned out to be fake, but it's the biggest, and frankly, this video has already gotten too long. A pastor in Tennessee also made the news for calling the police on a group of volunteers who asked FEMA to leave while happening to be open carrying. The pastor considered this a threat, said that an armed militia group had surrounded them and that they weren't safe. No arrests have been made in that encounter. But still, as we saw from the headlines in the beginning, that is being used to perpetuate these rumors that the horrible, dumb redneck militias are actively hunting down FEMA. Now, obviously, there have been some things about this whole situation that have gotten out that haven't been true, but this is a pretty big deal that FEMA and the media are actively perpetuating that seems to be completely made up. And FEMA has a lot more to gain in this situation from lying about what's actually happening than the people on the ground that don't have houses or cars or their families or jobs anymore. So in this situation, who would you believe? And that is it for this video, ladies and gentlemen. This was a long one. This took a lot of research, and again, disgusting. This whole situation is absolutely disappointing and disgusting. I expect this stuff from the government. I expected it less from the people, but there we go. At least it's the neighbors here that are helping neighbors. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, you guys know the drill for all of the algorithm things. Thank you for continuing to watch my channel, and as always, stay safe out there and happy shooting.